Christ is risen. Christos voskreσε. Christos ambiat.
Adevărul ambiat.
Christos anesti.
Alivos anesti.
Christos resuscitado. Christ is risen.
Truly is risen.
This is our YouTube channel today. We're doing it at the Parish, Orthodox Life with Bishop Nikolai, and we're going to start taking questions from the parish.
I'll start off with the first question.
Rocky has a question.
Oh.
What is your question, huh? When do we go home? Okay.
So I work at the university campus, and I've been getting approached a lot lately by people who are trying to get me to come to their non-denominational Bible studies. How should we respond when we get approached for these kind of things?
Well, I think the best way is to invite them to come to the original church. My experience is that when people are inviting you to those places, they're inviting to convert you. And I know people a lot of times say, well, you know, my family's there, my friends are there. Well, that's fine for them. But we have to keep ourselves focused on who we are and not to be distracted. And typically people that want to talk about their religion, they want to hear about yours. They want to tell you what they believe and what you should be believing. So I suggest that you just keep focused on your faith and the direction you're going.
Thank you.
Hello. I have actually a couple questions if there's time. But one is, what guidance do you have for a wife who is interested in pursuing orthodoxy, but her husband, while he is a believer, is not really interested at this time in pursuing his faith in church or in any actionable way? He keeps, more close in his mind and in his heart. What advice do you have on interactions, home life, setting boundaries about, coming to church, how often we're coming to church, or, things like that?
Our lives with Christ are personal. So even if you have a husband who is not interested in God, or at least not interested in orthodoxy, you just still need to do everything that you can to get close to him through the church. So you don't want to push him away from the church just by being more. Basically you don't want to be pressuring on him. But outside of pressure, for yourself, you should be doing everything that you would otherwise, even if you weren't, as though you weren't married, as far as your pursuit of getting closer to God.
I'd make a comment too. That doesn't happen just in a situation like this. That happens where both are Orthodox. One then decides that they want to be more involved in the church. Something happens, in their life, they think, well, I have to participate more. And then the other one, who's Orthodox, has the same kind of thoughts, it kind of pulls away. So it gets to be difficult that way too. And we can't force someone to do something that we're doing. The best thing is for us to lead them by example, but not to compromise what you're doing. You can go to your second question. Go ahead.
Okay. Also,
if it's not good, we'll cut it out.
Okay, perfect. So also, as someone who's just learning and been coming to church for a few months, but I want to bring orthodoxy home with me outside of the prayers that you've given me to do day and night. How can I bring orthodoxy into my home? How should my home perhaps change?
You want to do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing you can do is get some icons and make a dedicated spot in your home to have your icons as a place, is like a piece of church in your home, and use that as the dedicated, consecrated place, so to speak, in your home. Otherwise, you bring the faith with you everywhere you go just by being, carrying prayer inside yourself. So even even if you're just at home with your husband, you need to be prayerful around him, and just at all times striving to be, quiet inside, and just focused on things that are actually useful for your salvation.
Thank you.
I was wondering if there's a connection between pride and self-hatred.
Pride and self-hatred. Well, there's a relationship, but pride is a kind of a exaggerated sense of self-esteem. You esteem yourself as above others, above, generally speaking, just above everyone else, and even above God. You don't consider, this is what pride is. You consider yourself even above God, basically by disregarding God himself and disregarding other people, their needs, disregarding them as persons. And then, self-hatred comes from that. So that's the relationship. It comes from pride because, if we don't have, basically, if we consider ourselves to be the center of everything, then we're going to end up despising ourselves, because we are not the source of good. God is the source of good. So we cut out the source of good from our lives, and then all that's left is we can sense in ourselves the darkness, the sin that's inside ourselves. And so, of course, this is what leads to self-hatred. So I would say that's how it's related.
I think when we think about hating ourselves, we're really hating God. He created us. And we're kind of downplaying the fact that what he created is not good enough. Everybody is in a different place. Everybody looks different. Everybody acts differently. And we have to recognize that all of that we're still God's creatures. Unless we have that self-worth, then we fall into this thing of despair too. And then that leads to the other sins that go deeper and deeper that are all part of Satan. He'll pull us there. He'll pull us down. It's easier to pull someone down than to pull them up. So we have to really be careful of that. I always tell people that Jesus' prayer is the most powerful. To use that when these thoughts come, just keep saying it until that thought goes away. But unfortunately, people don't do it long enough. They do it for a while, say, oh, it didn't stop, I got to get back to this thought. No, you keep doing it until the thought goes away. It will go away.
Thank you.
If you're confessing something and you forget something to confess, is that like still forgiven, the thing that you forgot?
Well, it's very clear when you come to confession, you're only forgiven the sins that you confess. And there's two parts of that. The last part of the prayer is for those things that I forgot and I don't remember when you read that prayer. And those are honest mistakes that people make, but they're not forgiven. So you want to then, when you remember those things like that, generally speaking, we put them aside, they're for good. But when you remember that prayer, that sin that you committed, and you haven't confessed it, then confess it the next time. That happens, it's really interesting. Some of the older people in our parish, when they come to confession, they're confessing things that they remembered maybe 40, 50 years ago. It's beautiful. It's really touching, because they're realizing how important it is to be clean. We're all going to die, and the older we get, the more aware of that we are. But it's just beautiful when that happens. So the same thing with you. And Rocky agrees.
When preparing for confession, should we focus on the main sins which we remember, and that weigh on me, or try to write everything down so that I don't miss anything? And if I keep worrying that I may have forgotten something from the past, even after confessing before, should I bring it up again? I mean, not again, but should I try to remember it, to bring it up? to confession, or just focus on what's new since my last confession? Because when thinking of every sin, it makes just a little bit messy, and difficult to focus on. Or what if I forgot something from the past, and it's just like spreading thoughts.
Yeah, so as far as detail goes, with remembering, kind of remembering every instance of a particular sin, there's a middle ground of, kind of what is balanced when we come to confession. We don't need to list out, every single instance that we say an unkind word to somebody, maybe. We don't have to necessarily say every single time. Well, maybe for some people we do, because there may only be, it may be a less common thing for one person. And he might have only said something 2 times. Okay, well, you should say those 2 times. But there's a balance, which is that we have to get to our hearts. We have to enter into our hearts when we confess and pull out true repentance. And true repentance is not found through just a list, a technical list of of precision. It's not about precision of the exactly what happened. It's about recognizing what it was that we did that was, opposed to God, that was hurtful, had meanness inside of ourselves, selfishness, and bringing that to God. So this is why, if we strictly follow just an exact list, if we emphasize the list of all of these things that we've done, that's why that's going a little too far into what you could call a legalistic way of looking at confession. So we need to pay more attention to, the general state of our heart in this particular area of sin, in this particular passion. For instance, I was, even though I might have told a few different lies, just small lies here or there, we don't necessarily need to think of every, each one of these teeny little small lies. We should confess, I have lied, numerous times, and perhaps give some detail into, how I have not been concerned about telling the truth. I have not cared about telling the truth, and trying to delve into what's actually in our hearts. This is what we're trying to do at confession.
I think maybe there's something more that you were asking, and that is about bringing a list when you come to confession. Yes, you should be prepared. You shouldn't come to confession and all of a sudden that's your time that you're thinking about what sins you've committed. You should write those down so you're prepared. Nothing's worse than someone coming in, well, I don't remember, I don't think I did anything wrong. Well, of course you did. Let me help you. And those of you who've had that experience know that I'll help you. But yeah, you want to write the things down that are important. But like Father said, I yelled at my husband 4 times. The first time was on Tuesday, the second time was Wednesday, 3 o'clock. Don't do that. Get through the confession. I yelled at my husband, that's a sin. And if there's something more to go into that, however many times, we'll deal with that. It make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for my question. How important is it to have a spiritual father, and how does one find the right one?
Well, that's gotten a little bit out there somehow in the church. When you're in a parish, your priest is your spiritual father. When you're in a monastery, you have a spiritual father. Nuns have spiritual mothers. You should have that relationship with your parish priest. In a parish of our size, there's no reason not to have that relationship with your priest. If we were, twice as big as we are now, then you would want to have maybe a spiritual father who's going to help you and direct you in the kinds of things that are necessary. But you've got to be careful of that too, because sometimes people use that idea of a spiritual father of being able to override what's going on in the parish. Your parish is your home. This is your life. So that relationship first has to start there. And later, as that relationship with the priest becomes, closer for you, then you'll feel more close to that person being your spiritual father and refer to that person as such. Make sense?
Thank you.
Sure.
Master Bless.
So be upon you.
Today in the homily, you said the importance of asking questions. It's a good thing. You mentioned Thomas. In your life, has there been any questions that you've been chewing on or struggling with that you have answered that can help us spiritually today?
No, I can't think of that. I'm not saying that in some prideful way. I approach the church probably a little bit differently than most people coming into the church from outside, in that I grew up in the church. And I just kind of accept what the church has given us, and over the years, my life in the church has become more strict, because when you're learning certain things, you start moving in a different direction, hopefully. And I think those are the kind of things that have been important to me. The hard part in the church is being able to know that the church is first. And sometimes people, priests, bishops have that problem sometimes. The church is kind of, secondary to my family or to my job or whatever they're doing. If the church is first, I think you'll be blessed. So I can't think of that. I don't dwell on those things. I try not to think about, I never look back at what if. What if? How do we know what if is? I never dreamed 25 years ago, standing on the cathedral in Dallas, Texas, that I'd be here in Las Vegas in exile in the Orthodox Church. I expected my life in the church to be, a shepherd in the church, and going out and leading people and directing them and doing that on a larger scale than I'm doing now. But as I've said many times, I've reconciled with that. I couldn't be happier than where I'm at right now.
Thank you.
Master bless.
So be upon you.
Like I am a godmother. Of course, I have to pray for my children, to guide them, to give them good advice and everything. If I am being questioned, do you pray for me? You do enough for me, and do I have to tell them? Or it's my, I don't know how to explain it, it's just for me, God know I pray for them. Or I have to tell them, oh yeah, I pray, or I'm thinking about you all the time. How it's correct, Vladyka? How?
Well, yeah, you need to be honest. If they ask you, your godchild asks you, are you praying for me? Yes, I do. I have you in my prayer book, and I do. I don't think that I'd go so far to say I think about you all the time, because you don't. There's no need to do that. People don't believe it anyway. So, and that's enough. That should be enough.
Okay.
Then your question is, do you pray for me?
Yes.
It works both sides.
Yeah, okay.
And some of you have been asked to be godparents for newcomers coming to the church. And some, stay, some don't stay, some go maybe to a different Orthodox church. It's not your responsibility. Don't worry about that. Everybody makes their decisions where they want to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't feel guilty.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I'll share a story with you from yesterday when I was in the park with Rocky. It was kind of a nice story. It was a very encouraging story. It was sad in some ways, but very encouraging. There's a group of us that walk our dogs at the same time. I mean, it's the same time every morning and every evening, and not the same people are there every time. I'm not there when there's church days or when I'm busy in the evenings. But when we gather, there's about 10 of us who have dogs, and the dogs all play with each other, and it's a very nice atmosphere. And so this new fellow started coming maybe a month ago, I guess, or 2 months. I think he said last night, about 2 months ago. And we didn't know him very well. And last night he just sat with, there were 2 others of us there, another lady and I. And he started talking. She started asking some questions about, where he came from. He came from Los Angeles about 3 years ago to help his sister, who wasn't doing very well. And so he was retired. He just turned 75. And he came here, and he's got a little dog, Rogue. And this dog chases this other dog, Alfie, every time. Alfie's is bigger than Rocky. And he chases him all over the park, and Alfie's just scared to death of this little dog. It's really funny to watch because Alfie's kind of a sissy. So anyway, then he started bringing his sister's little dog to the park about a month ago. Same size dog, tiny little dog, Emma. And they're really cute, and they play with the other dogs. And so he was telling us that his wife died 3 years ago, and she was diagnosed with lupus, I think like 3 months after their oldest son was born. And throughout the years, her lupus got increasingly worse, and finally, just 3 years ago, she had an aneurysm, and she died very quickly. But before she died, 3 months before she died, their oldest son, 28 years old, died. So you can imagine that the stress of that death of her son probably brought on the death even of her own death. So then to think this man has gone through that kind of pain in his life, and he comes here to help his sister, and he was talking about that he has another son, a younger son in Florida, and he and his wife want him to move to Florida. And he said he's thinking about doing that. But the interesting thing was here that he was walking in the park yesterday, and this lady, young lady, said she was about 30 years old, came to him, and she was teary-eyed, and she had this little white dog. And she says, "I've been watching you in the park." She said, I'm losing my house. I have no place to live, and I have no place for my dog. Will you take him? And he just kind of looked at her and says, "Well, are you sure you?" And she said, she was just sobbing. She said, "I've been watching you for 3 days with your dogs." He said, "I'll take your dog." He took the dog and found a home for the dog. Now, the kindness here of someone who's obviously suffering, we have to see those things in other people. We don't know what's in everybody's heart, but to recognize that there might be some suffering there. And because there is, we should recognize that we have to be aware of that, and we have to be kind toward those people. No matter whatever way they might come across, there might be some pain there, and we can bring that pain down to a level that's bearable maybe for them. So I thought it was very nice. This guy turned out to be a nice addition to our park people. So Terry and I were talking about that afterwards, how nice that was. And to think the kindness that he had coming to help his sister after his wife died, his son died, he's coming to help her, and here he is helping another dog too. Dog people only can relate to that. Okay, next question. It's called a filler.
Master bless.
Bless Lord be upon you.
My question is, when people saying, "I'm proud of you," especially for kids, "I'm so proud of you, I'm so proud of you," how we should respond? And also, when we go into church, some people saying, "Have fun." What's the answer?
Well, we can't change what people's vocabularies are. You know how I am when people say they're proud. I totally dismiss that. I think that's the wrong thing to say. Pride was the fall of man. Right? Started with Lucifer and came down to us. Proud. We need to be grateful, not prideful, but grateful. And have fun. Who has fun in church? We have fun in church. Now we pray, we worship, we give glory to God, we receive the Eucharist, and then we have our fun here together. So put it that way. Don't look at it that they're making fun of your church. Think of it that you're going to have fun after we're serious in church.
Thank you.
Golden Mouth Roastery is a very small coffee roastery started by a priest to help support his family. People ask about what is the meaning of golden mouth? What does that come from? You know, golden mouth comes from a particular saint named John Chrysostom. You know, I'm an Orthodox priest, and I have a great love for this particular saint who was known as the Golden Mouth because he spoke very eloquently about spiritual matters. It's very important these days to not add extra toxicity to our lives. You know, coffee is, you know, for a lot of people, coffee is an everyday drink. And so I feel really good about providing something that people drink every day that doesn't add to that toxicity overload. It's family run. It's just pretty much myself, my wife, and my children. They all help out at different times. My favorite part of the business is really just the freshness of the coffee that you get from roasting. You know, it just makes a huge difference if the coffee is fresh versus just been months and months on the shelf. An equal favorite part of this business is the fact that the coffee is organic. And I don't do any coffee that isn't organic. This is really important to me.
Vladyka, bless.
Bless the Lord be upon you.
So my question is, a lot of Protestant friends we have, they say like the crucifixion of Christ was him taking all the wrath of God for men. That doesn't sound right to me.
Of course it's not right. He is God. Christ is God.
So what is the purpose and meaning of
You
dying
need to know what, you as an Orthodox Christian need to know what that meaning is. To teach them is going to be very difficult because they're taught a certain thing, and we're not out there to try to correct anybody in what they're doing unless they ask us. You know, Christ took on, sin for us. His only begotten Son died on the cross to allow us redemption. You know, before the resurrection, everybody went to hell. The doors were locked, they were closed. Christ came and opened the doors to heaven, to our salvation. This is the glory of it. They're all twisted around with this thing about Christian Zionism too. That's relatively new. That's nothing old. You don't even hear that in Europe. You hear that only in America. It's Protestant churches wanting to somehow justify Judaism in Christianity. You can't justify it in Christianity. You know, Christ made it very clear, unless you receive Him and are baptized, you have no salvation. Plain and simple.
So why did he have to die in that way?
He didn't. He didn't. He gave us an example of how we're supposed to put off ourselves. In life, nothing in our life is going to be more painful than the humiliation and the crucifixion on the cross. Nothing. You know, I've had cancer several times. Nothing would compare to crucifixion on the cross, what Christ went through. He gave us that example. God's only begotten Son. One of the three of the Trinity. God. That example. He didn't have to be baptized either. He showed us how to be baptized. Not pouring on of water over the head. I just saw that. Someone sent me a video. I was just so bothered by watching it. From my home country, in Serbia. Holding the child over here in this little pot here, pouring water dripping down the top of the head. It made me sad. That's not how Christ showed us how we're supposed to be baptized. He gave us an example. He took the bread and the wine, said, "This is my body, this is my blood." Passed it on to us.
Yeah. Thank you, Vladyka.
You're welcome. Oh, the co-star's back.
So, What miracles have you witnessed, and have you ever seen a demon face to face?
Every time I see a person, I've seen a miracle.
Hmm.
Who could create this? Only God. Now, on a more primitive level, we just had the blessing of water in January. That water never goes bad. I've mentioned that I still have this much of the water that I blessed over 50 years ago. Still tastes as good as it did then. That's a miracle.
Have you ever seen a demon face to face?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever seen a demon face to face?
I've watched demon-possessed people.
That's it?
Scary.
Okay, that was all.
Very scary.
Master Bless.
It's going to be upon you.
What's a good approach for what you would say for a man who gets bashed for loving the church by evangelicals for loving the church more than loving Israel?
Then what?
Than loving Israel by evangelicals?
Yeah, that's the same thing I was talking about. It's becoming a problem.
Yeah.
It tells you they can't read the scriptures. That's the problem.
No.
You know, how do we raise someone to the level of Christ by something that's below him? I don't know how we do that. And you'll only get an argument with these people.
Yeah.
You have to just, smile and walk away.
You get to that point, yeah.
Hmm? I mean, that's the only answer I can say.
Yeah. Okay. But I'm not in the... They tend to make me try to feel wrong for loving the church
Why
more.
should you feel wrong? Be grateful for where you're going.
Yes.
Be grateful for the direction you're headed. Be grateful that this has been revealed to you. We had a couple at our table here, this morning. They've been friends of mine for a long time, and I don't push the church on anybody. And maybe a few weeks ago, Sharon was mentioning about thinking to come to the church, and I actually suggested that they go to St. Paul's because it's all English, and they preferred to come here, so they came today. And I don't push that. You should come and try it and see. The doors are open. We're here. We're not pushing anything on anybody. Don't push yours on me. That's my answer.
Thank you.
Sure. Are you done? No questions?
I have a couple questions. So when I was starting my prayer, I would usually skip the intercessory prayers because I had this idea that I'm not a holy person, my prayers aren't going to do anything. Well, now I'm trying to get into doing those. Can you maybe speak to maybe that feeling that some people might have, or what the point of doing intercessory prayers for other people is?
Well, we pray for other people for all kinds of different reasons, and generally, the intercessors are the saints. We intercede on our behalf before Christ. That's always a difficult part for Protestants first looking at Orthodoxy, the saints, to pray to saints. We do that because they're closer to God, and we take our own patron saints. And at some time, one of our YouTubes, I'll talk about the saints that are particular in my life and how that happened through the course of the years. And it'll happen to all of you. The same thing happens. Anybody that comes into the church and you've been in the church a long time, there's some saint all of a sudden that will stick out to you. Learn about that saint. And then you'll realize why that saint became, was revealed to you in that way. So we pray for living, we pray for dead. Because they're God's creatures, and we're asking for God's mercy. Same thing about that?
Yeah, just what I would add is that God listens to every one of us when we ask Him for things with love in our hearts. So when we pray for other people, we're praying for them out of love for them. Even if it's an enemy, it's still coming from that place of love in our hearts. If we're asking God to have mercy on this person, it's always from that area. Otherwise, we wouldn't pray for them. What is a prayer for this person? We're asking God to have mercy on them, asking God to be with them. This can only be said out of love. So God always listens to this.
In the liturgy of St. Basil, it says, make the evil good by your goodness. And I use that prayer, sometimes, and make the evil good by your goodness, because there are people that I don't like, and people who've been evil toward me over the years. But I add the other part of that, allow me to be good in seeing some goodness in them and not the evil they did. That's a hard thing to do, because the first thing you want to do is you want to lash out at them. So.
My second question is about health and looks. It's nothing new, but there are a bunch of new surgeries and things you can inject and all these kind of things. But what's maybe an Orthodox view or approach we should have when thinking about our health and not being too vain, these kinds of things. What should we think?
It's everywhere, right? Everywhere. It's just, even when I watch some of these podcasts, the ads that come through are just crazy. They're almost entertaining, but I'm an advocate of growing old gracefully. I don't think you need to do that stuff. Botox and tummy tucks and breast enhancements.
You're saying you don't have any of those?
Well, I quit using. I'm saying I quit doing them. So I think that you need to take care of your body. I'm an advocate of that. I've been criticized over the years because I've exercised all my life. I was an athlete in high school, and I've exercised all my life because I believe that God's only going to give this to me one time. Same thing with my teeth. I take care of my teeth because I'm going to only get one set. I'm not going to get to repeat it again. After those baby teeth are gone, it's all over. So I think we have to take care of our bodies in that regard. But to do it these other ways, it's not the thing that we should be doing. You've had a tummy tuck.
All right, thank you.
Have any of you guys met any saints face to face, while they were alive?
Yes, sit down. Well, that's a good question. I have, yes. Saint Justin Popovic. I served with him actually in 1979 in Serbia, and he's about your height, and he had these piercing blue eyes, and he was thought of then as one of the most renowned theologians in Orthodoxy. He was in exile at the monastery there at Celia because he was the contender to be patriarch of the Serbian church, and he wrote this letter about what he would do, and so they put him in exile, so locked him up. And later on he was canonized by the Serbian church. There are probably some others, that I don't know yet, that maybe we'll know in time, but that in particular, that person, yeah, I did. And you see me, so that's...
Yeah. No, you wouldn't, in any case, you can't say absolutely that you've met a saint unless you've met someone who died and then was canonized, in any case, so it's, but you can meet people that are very prayerful, and see people who are leading holy lives, and this is of course who we should strive to be, be able to be around these kind of people.
Hi, my question is more about these books, manuscripts, gospels that didn't make the Bible of today, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Book of Enoch. Would you say that these books, if any of us were to research them, would they bring any value to our faith of today?
Well, you know, we have the books of the Bible that were established, you know, by the canons, by the councils of the church, that these were our canonical books. It doesn't mean that there aren't more out there. There are. And I was going to bring that up in my sermon this morning, talking about St. Thomas, just because of the Epistle of Thomas, that we can read those things. There's nothing wrong with reading them, as long as they don't conflict with what has been given to us. Because what has been given to us is what the church teaches. So there'd be no problem in doing that if you wanted to do that, I don't think. And I really advocate you reading the New Testament. You start reading the Old Testament, then you start trying to justify, you know, Judaism into Orthodoxy, and they don't fit.
I'll just add also that, you know, already what the church gives to us as being useful for our salvation is a tremendous amount. So there's of course no, like Vladyka said, there's no problem with reading other things that didn't make it into the Bible, but you know, there's so much that, you know, have we already exhausted all of the materials that the church has given us that as being the most useful for our salvation? You know, and if the answer is no, well then what are we doing? Looking elsewhere, you know.
Thank you.
I guess I'll ask a question to Father. I want him to hear him speak some more. Father bless.
God bless.
So one of the simple questions I want to ask you is basically, what do you think is like the expectations for the parishioners that come here? Like, what is the bar that you set for every Orthodox Christians that come to the church?
Okay, well, it starts with needing to come to the weekend services, you know, the Sunday service, which includes Saturday, the Saturday evening service, Sunday morning, and then the great feasts. Expectation is that we all are following the fasting periods, the fast days, the Wednesdays and Fridays outside of the regular fasts, and that we're saying prayers at home, when we bless that we ask for God to bless our food everywhere, when we go out to eat, when we eat at home. You know, we should be saying a prayer before our primary meals. Like if we're just having some kind of little something at home, we don't have to say a full prayer, but we should still make the sign of the cross over the food. Same with water. As simple as a glass of water. Every glass of water that we drink, we should be making a cross over that water. We're seeking to have God's grace be, you know, in everything that we're partaking of. And then, you know, apart from coming to the services and keeping this kind of daily routine of prayer at home,
communion.
There's of course the regular coming to receive the sacraments of confession, making sure we're receiving communion, because of course when we come to church, you know, the whole idea is that we're coming to be in communion with God. And so we have the primary the primary way that we experience this communion is through the Eucharist that we receive at the liturgy. So this is what, when we come to Saturday evening, when we come to all of the other services throughout the year, we're preparing ourselves to be in a state that we can receive God's grace. And the epitome of that is the receiving of the Eucharist. You know.
And one last question for Vladyka. Is the bar set any different since you had ordained many clergy for clerics? Have you set the bar a little higher for them, or what's your expectation for clergy?
Well, no, you shouldn't set the bar differently for one or another. You know, everybody's on the same level with that. You know, everything that Father Dimitri said is what we expect from every Orthodox Christian. Certainly we expect every priest to do all of that, plus those things that are necessary in the priestly life. There are prayers that priests have to take before they serve the liturgy. There are the prayers, the extra prayers that we take during the liturgy, during the Vespers, and during the Matins. Those things are, their expectations are they have to be done. Yeah, but they're the same for everybody. Others who, when priests are in different roles in the church, then that bar may be higher because they have to do certain other things. For example, if you've got a dean of a deanery, that dean is expected to be the overseer of a certain number of parishes, and he has to be able also to make sure that he's still overseeing his own parish. So that raises that bar a little bit higher for him. But that's an administrative thing, not on the basis of being a priest.
Thank you.
Well, we're all out of time now, so,
Master bless.
This might be upon you.
I'd like for both of you guys to answer this, to get your guys' opinion on a question that I think would be for general inquirers and people who are catechumens, which would be, I've seen in my experience, and other people have said it too, where I was part of that, where how does one balance the intellectual side of the faith with actually practicing the faith?
How do you?
By practicing.
How do you?
How do I?
How do you do it?
Less thinking.
That's right. That's right. It gets to be a head game. It's all a distraction. Let your heart lead you in the church. Learn about the faith and let your heart guide you. It goes very easy. Anything?
I don't understand the words.
Intellectual versus practice.
Balance intellectual versus practice.
In other words, like there's people that read a lot in terms of church history and whatnot. They can know the canons or something, but maybe they're not the best at applying their faith outside, or even in their lives.
I think they should address that in particular. I'm not sure it's for us to say that they're doing that. Do we really know that? Are the opportunities there? We're not hard to find. That's where you should get your answers.
And the second question would be, for the people coming in, it was confusing for me at first 2 years ago, but for those who are coming here now, it'd be helpful for them to hear, since there's different jurisdictions and whatnot, Russian, Greek, OCA.
15.
Yeah, so many. Some people outside can critique that and say, well, what is Orthodoxy, since there's different, types, quote unquote. But what would you say to that for those people here when they hear that from others outside, whether it be Catholics, Protestants, or just people who are counter to the faith?
Orthodoxy is the same in all of those churches. In Las Vegas, we have 7 Orthodox churches, right? They're all under different bishops. Same church, same Orthodox church. The ethnic part of those churches all have their own traditions. Some try to incorporate every different tradition from every different group, thinking that they're going to draw more people, and that doesn't work. You have to be who you are. The Roman Church, had that for many, many years. They used to have ethnic parishes. When I grew up in my hometown, there was an Italian church, there was an Irish Catholic church, there was a Polish Catholic church. I mean, it's what they did. And they tried to, incorporate, make it all the same. And now they're going back again where they've got these parishes that are more ethnic. You've got a lot of Filipino churches in the Roman Church. You've got a lot of, Hispanic churches. So I think that, the decision of what goes on in that parish comes from the rector. What does the rector see the needs of his people? And then you try to meet those needs the best way you can. I don't have a bunch of different languages in the church. The only 2 languages that we use liturgically are English and the Russian, the Church Slavonic. And that's because I don't want to make this some kind of a hodgepodge. You know, we don't take the same thing every week. What I took today in English, next week will be in Slavonic. Or when I look at the crowd, I don't do that now on Sundays because there's too many people. But holy days, I served last week, I think I served all in English. You know, just because of who was there. There are times that I serve all in Russian because that's who's there. But that's, again, for the needs of the people. You know, you have to know your people to meet the needs. And the people have to accept you as the Father are trying to meet those needs the best way you see possible for them. So it's not an easy place to be. You know, I told Father Dimitri many times, he's in the best situation a priest can be in. He's got a bishop here who handles all of the issues. He's just a priest. He can be the priest. Most priests can't do that. They have to worry about the budget, about, you know, did they sweep the parking lot today for church? Was the parking lot sealed? Was it restriped? How's the roof? How's the air conditioning? Are the toilets blocked? You know? There's a lot of things that go on that people don't realize. But that, again, you know, he's learning that from me. Because he's going to have to do that someday. But then again, as the parish grows, more people are going to be doing more of those things too. You know, when we started here, I mean, I had nobody in the altar. I mean, it was just me and, well, I had a couple of servers, but they weren't worth anything. They didn't know what to do. You know, they're more of a distraction. You know, when you're in the church, you're serving me. He serves me, and you serve me. You're not serving with me, you serve me. You're to make my prayerful life at that liturgy as focused on Christ. So I'm not distracted by what page you got to turn on, you know, what communion cloth you put out. That stuff should be taken care of. And that's how it will be in time. But everybody has to submit to that.
And last question is kind of off topic, but different mood setting. What's your guys' favorite food, type of food, not during Lent or fasting? And what's your favorite dessert?
Oh, Mexican food is my favorite.
I'd have to say hamburgers.
Hamburgers? And desserts?
I don't know. Ice cream.
Ice cream, okay, fair enough.
Vanilla ice cream.
Vanilla ice cream.
From Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
Dairy Queen, okay.
Tiramisu.
Tiramisu, okay.
Yeah.
So that everyone can know for future reference. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Master bless.
Bless the Lord be upon you.
Vladyka, you stated that you were an athlete in high school. Of course, there are other sports like boxing and wrestling that are a little bit more violent. As an Orthodox Christian, is it sinful to practice and compete in these sports? And if not, then when does it become sinful?
We have UFC fighters in our parish.
Oh, yeah.
It's really fun when you talk with them afterwards. You know, they're worrying about they're hurting somebody. You know, I mean, it's just, well, that's what you're supposed to do, right? I guess. Well, you don't want to be in any kind of sports that are going to be aggressive to hurt someone deliberately. I think most of those official recognized sports, they probably try to watch that. I don't like football. I never liked football. I thought it was the dumbest sport in the world. I mean, these men lining up and bumping into each other. I mean, you know, what's the point? I mean, you know, I wrestled in high school. That was good. I mean, that was because I was doing it. It was good. But you have to know your limits. You know, not try to hurt somebody. I remember the last wrestling match that I had. It was in the championships, and we were in Missoula, Montana. And I was in the JV line in my weight class. It was 152 or something like I don't remember, 152, 154, something like that. And our heavyweight guy got sick, and because I looked like I'd be the best person to fill in, they put me in this match with this guy that was like the size of that door. Now, what am I supposed to do with this guy? I mean, you know, But I wasn't going to let him pin me, and didn't. He had to win by decision, but I was not going to let him pin me. But I couldn't do a thing. He's just too big. And I don't think he was trying to hurt me either, because he probably couldn't move either.
Thank you, Master.
Yeah.
To kind of expand on what he just said right now, when it comes to competing in combat sports, there's a huge sense of pride and ego that comes with it. What would be a good way to kind of fight that? Each time I step in the ring or step on the mat, I get a good sense of pride and ego, but I feel like it's wrong.
Do you think there's no pride and ego in a ballerina performing?
There is.
Sure.
Yeah.
So don't just think it's in combat sports. It's in everything that we do. We want other people to look at us and recognize how good we're doing. We have to control that.
Yeah.
You know, where you're at in competing in those things, you have to control that too. You know, maybe a good prayer would be that, to give me the strength to perform, appropriately, and that I not deliberately hurt anyone, and that I not be deliberately hurt either.
Yes.
Maybe that's a good prayer, huh?
Thank you.
I wanted to be nice in case he body slammed me. Sure.
Okay, so you touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to bring it down to a bit more like of a personal level when you're interacting with friends and family. Again, as a new person pursuing Orthodoxy, obviously you get real zealous when you find the truth. You're so excited, you want everybody to know. And basically everybody in my life, with the exception of a couple people, are heterodox. So I'm wondering, how do we interact lovingly with our heterodox family and friends, particularly when we get into moments where we are discussing matters of faith and, our new understanding disagrees with them, and we don't want to alienate them, because we hope and pray that one day they'll find that truth as well. So what is that balance, and what advice do you have about having those conversations with those people that you love?
You want to just show respect to everybody. And so with your family, you're not trying to show them what they should be doing. You're not trying to explain to them what they should be doing. So, your position should always be one of, if having a conversation about your faith, it should just be in the sense of, this is what I do, this is what I have found to be, best for me, And I also believe it's, the most correct thing to do for everybody. But that's about the extent that you should go as far as putting it on them. I believe this is for everyone, but at least for myself, for sure, I've found this to be what is the most helpful.
And invite them to come. I talk about this sometimes, about inviting people to come to see the traditional church. Come and see what I've found that's been good for me. And from a historical standpoint, you'll see something very ancient. That's good enough. To discuss it, it comes back to what I said earlier. They're not interested in learning about Orthodoxy. They're interested in telling you what you should believe and what they believe, or pulling you away, especially if that's where you've been before. So it's hard. The key factor there, I think, is love. Treat people with love, dignity and respect, and everything will be fine. Not everybody will accept that, but you've done the right thing.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like that's enough of the questions for today, huh? So we can close.